So today we're going to do more stats. We're going to take a look at the 3 maps that we didn't take a look at yesterday and also some of the overall data. If you didn't watch yesterday's video, it's probably worth going back and watching to learn about the other 4 maps. And also I take a bit more time to explain, what exactly is going on basically with some of the things you're about to see. So if at any point you get confused, well, you've only got yourself to blame. Go and watch yesterday's video. But yeah, today we're going to dive in to the other 3 maps, which is Lotus, Pearl, and Split. And we're going to start with Lotus, which was the second most played map out of 76 overall team comps, and these are the 3 kind of more popular ideas, you would say, on the map. You've got kind of the meta comp here, but I do find the kind of Fnatic 2023 meta comp has Vice has basically replaced Killjoy as the most popular. Still, there are some teams still running the Killjoy, running the old school format, but it does seem like Vice is maybe, a slightly more popular option in this comp, at least for now. Then here you've got kind of the double initiator. Team Heretics were playing a lot of this. We'll get to this comp in a little bit, talking about some of the win rates. And then we've also got kind of the EDG idea. Now, this would have more games overall, but EDG themselves actually swapped a Fade for a Sova midway through, so it is technically a different comp. So this would have more games if it wasn't for EDG swapping midway through. But let's move on to talking about some of the archetypes. And here's where we can talk about how Lotus, and this has always been true, by the way, Fnatic basically in 2023, it seems like they did just actually find the best way of playing Lotus, like straight away, because all throughout 2023, all throughout 2024, and now even to start 2025, you can see that the non-mirror win rates of the kind of a Fnatic meta comp, and this might be with a Vice instead of a Killjoy, but it's still playing out in a very similar way. It just wins. It just wins. And this double initiator idea, I really have to talk about this because I don't get why anyone plays these like Breach Sova, Breach Fade, Breach Teo comps. They're just not very good on this map, okay? They never have been. Team Heretics were one of the first teams to play this last year at Shanghai. And Team Heretics themselves went away from it because they know what they're doing. And they could realize that, hey, this comp isn't even that good on this map. So we're going to swap back to a more kind of, old school, Fnatic meta comp instead of playing this double initiator, which last year was horrendous in the win rates. This year it's horrendous in the win rates, just winning 1 out of every 4 non-mirror, double initiator game it plays. Yeah, just really, really not that good. And the thing is, like, Lotus is a double smokes map, right? You must play double smokes because the EDG comp, which does still play double smokes, still does pretty well, right? Like, if you want to play a kind of more aggro style, play an EDG comp, right? That's the way you want to go. But you must play double smokes, essentially, on this map, it seems, because basically not too many other ideas work, other than, I will say, T1 and their kind of, weird comp with the ISO, the kind of Haven-esque comp, you would say, with the ISO. They did win 3 games on it, which is helping the double duelist win rate out, but I think, longer term, you probably are more so looking at, sticking with what we know and the Fnatic meta. And when we take a look at some of the agent win rates, this is somewhat bearing out as well, right? Viper, is doing pretty well. You've got your Breach and Teo down here. It's just not doing well. This is by far Teo's worst map in terms of his win rate, by the way. Actually, surprisingly, somewhat Vice, is only doing okay as well, right? I mean, this isn't bad, but, not dominating. This is probably actually one of Vice's worst maps, to be honest, in terms of this win rate. You can see here from the agent win rates as well, like playing Breach or Teo, the Breach idea, just give it up. Just give it up. It doesn't work. It's not very good. It will never be good on this map. Okay, let's move on then to Pearl. And in terms of some of the different Pearl ideas we're seeing, obviously, you've got kind of what your old school, like, again, kind of Ascent-esque here, with, like, basically Ascent with an Astra, is the most popular comp. But then you've got, like, this is the G2 comp here, which is more of maybe a new school idea. Double Sentinel here with Vice Chamber. We'll get into some of that Double Sentinel stuff in a second. And then you've also got these kind of ideas, we're getting more Yoru, we're getting kind of Teo Fade, these kind of ideas getting in there. Kind of playing a bit different to the overall kind of more, standard basic 2023 comps. And if we take a look at the archetypes on Pearl, there is some interesting things going on, because the most popular way of playing the map is the old school. Play it, play it like Ascent, like just play Ascent comps, bro. That is by far the most picked archetype, but its win rate is not very good. Win rate wise, that doesn't seem to be the best way of playing the map. It seems like the best way of playing the map is actually double Sentinel, which did make up, you know, a small amount of the overall meta, but had a very, very good win rate. And I know a lot of you will probably think, well, that's just G2. But it wasn't just G2 that were playing double Sentinel on Pearl. You know, quite a few different other teams were finding some success. BBL were also playing, I think, either a very similar or exactly the same comp as G2, and also winning with it. Right, it wasn't just G2 that were finding some success with double Sentinel. There were other teams out there that were playing maybe not even necessarily the exact double Sentinel comp either, right? It didn't have to be like Vice Chamber. There were some, you know, like Vice Killjoy options as well. I think Nongshim were one of those teams that were playing double Sentinel and also winning on Pearl. So there are multiple other teams outside of G2 that were playing double Sentinel and also finding some success doing it. So this will be interesting to see, you know, further down the line. Are we going to see more of, you know, Vice Chamber, Vice Killjoy, maybe Vice Cypher, you know, who knows? Could be quite interesting to see teams, you know, kind of go down that line. And now let's come to the agent win rates here, and there are some interesting things to take a look at. The first one is that Fade is getting dominated by Sova. It seems like Sova is definitely the better choice over Fade, at least so far. KO actually struggling a little bit as well. Teo still doing pretty well. I actually found it interesting. Killjoy not doing so well. Seems like Cypher, and especially if Teo is going to be good on Pearl, you know, that even more so perhaps solidifies that maybe Cypher is a better option, and Vice, you know, is still doing pretty well. But I do want to quickly talk about Jet versus Yoru, because we saw on Abyss yesterday that this was basically flipped, right? That Jet was clearly the better option over Yoru on Abyss, but here it's the opposite way around, where it seems like Yoru is very clearly a better option than Jet on Pearl. And I think that honestly, if you take a look at what I was talking about Abyss yesterday with some of the struggles that Yoru might have on that map versus some of the advantages that Jet can provide, it is basically flipped here, right? Like some of the things that we were talking about yesterday, like for instance, if we just take a look and think about Yoru, one of the main advantages that he has, but he doesn't have on Abyss, but he does here on Pearl, is that you can do stuff like this, right? So this is a G2 versus Sen game. You can have your Yoru here, and if they go A, you know, we can TP across the map very quickly, right? We can do this kind of thing, right? And especially in like a G2 kind of setup, right? Defending B long, this is always going to be your main question on a map like Pearl, right? How are you going to defend this? Well, how are we going to defend this as G2? Well, we've got two players who can potentially TP out here, right? And get away, and so we can be aggressive down B. And with a Yoru, right, we can be all the way aggressive. We don't have to like stick around. We can fully push out if we want to and still TP halfway across the map. So that's a big advantage. Second thing is as well, when you're playing double Sentinel like G2 are, you can afford to go for this kind of risky setup and still have, you know, Vice utility on A in case they go there, right? Or Vice utility in mid to help your defense there, and still have the wall behind this if your Yoru and Chamber do have to TP away, right? So we've got multiple kind of layers to this essentially for G2, which means that, you know, they can get into these situations and you can get, you can see the strength of this comp straight away, right? Just in terms of what we did there, right? We held down B. We made sure that they weren't coming here at all, and then we've quickly TP'd. We got our Yoru rotating across here. We still got Vice stuff on the site for when Sentinels come in here. You can see some of the advantages of this, right? And if we just talk about it from a Jet perspective, I was talking about how, you know, Jet on Abyss has the advantages of, you know, oh, you can go all these different ways, and, you know, you can use the kind of verticality on the map. Well, here on Pearl, there isn't that, you know, there are some positions where you can maybe use some of the verticality, but it's not probably going to be a mainstay of how you're playing the map, right? It's not going to be like a main component of what is going on this map. There isn't as many things to do with playing with the verticality, so it becomes predictable if you do it. So therefore, Yoru is just pretty clearly a better option here on Pearl, and I think most teams probably should be leaning into the Yoru here on Pearl if they aren't already. And then finally, let's move to Split. The Split was actually the least played map. I don't really know why, but it was barely played in China at all. But the comps that we've got here, at the top you kind of got the old, like, last year Sen meta comp. You know, if you're a Sen fan, you'll recognize this one. Actually, Sen aren't playing this themselves, but still some other teams are. But we definitely had a kind of wave of, you know, newer comps as well, like obviously incorporating like a Teo. We're seeing more Yoru on this map in general, I would say, this year. But you've still got teams like MIBR, you know, going back to basics and, you know, going even older school, essentially 2023 style, playing the double duelist Raze Jet. Now, what I really love about Split, though, is from an archetype point of view, there is a lot of different stuff going on, right? If you take a look at just the pick rates of the different archetypes here, you can see that they're all getting some play, but there is no dominant archetype, right? In terms of the Sen meta stuff last year, that's actually not doing too great. Double Duelist is actually the most played archetype overall, and is doing pretty well, but it seems like the double initiator, either Viper or double initiator with a Sentinel, are kind of the highest, you would say, here in terms of, and I think perhaps have the longest, best chance of success. So I think that's probably where you should be going, with a kind of double initiator, maybe something like Breach Tail, Viper, that kind of stuff. Of course, we have seen a bit of double Sentinel. Hasn't worked as well here on Split as maybe some of the other maps, but still is a perfectly respectable way of playing the map. It seems like the Sen meta of all things is perhaps struggling the most. And in terms of the win rates, there are some interesting things. If you've stuck with me for a long time and have been watching for a long time, you might remember that on Split, historically, Split has been an Omen map. In terms of Omen's win rate for the past 3 years has always been better than Astra. Even when Astra was considered very strong, Omen's win rate was still higher on a map like Split. So I find it interesting that this is actually bucking the trend, at least to start this year. We'll see how this goes further on, of course. But then going through, interesting again, even though Skye was played a lot last year on Split, even after the Skye nerfs, Skye never had that great of a non-mirror win rate, and that's actually sticking around this time as well, where you can see Skye not doing so well despite having, a fairly high pick rate of 48% overall. Teo doing pretty well on Split, and we have seen some good Teo, right? We even early on, right? I think in that 100 Thieves versus Sentinels game, probably one of the first games where we saw some like really good Teo stuff, and you really saw the value of that agent coming out. And it does seem like that has kind of, continued throughout, where teams, playing Teo have been able to find some pretty good use for Teo on this map. I think, it's maybe one of the slightly better maps for his ult. And also, obviously the rockets on a map like Split are going to be pretty good in general. Apart from that, not too much to report on, but certainly some interesting things going on. But now let's come to the overall data, right? Who is getting picked the most? Who is getting the most wins in their non-mirror games? Well, let's start with the pick rates, and what you're looking at here is out of 470 comps overall, you got the agents. The way you read this is down the left and then across. You got their number in percentage, and then their number here in brackets of how many games overall that is out of 470. And you can see we have no one above 50%. And this is the first time I've done this for sure, that no agent has been above 50%. I mean, normally there's an agent above 60%. Sometimes even there's an agent, pushing towards 70. So to not have anyone even above 50, not even above 45, it really does go to show that I think this is, certainly probably the best time in terms of the meta, in terms of how open it is, right now at least, which is great. So yeah, I mean, the people at the top though, the agents at the top, probably not too surprising, right? Your Omens, your Rays, Sovas, Astra, makes sense. Then you've got kind of like a second bracket of the 30%ers, which is Breach, Cypher, and Jet. But Breach definitely getting a bit of a boost, I would say, thanks to Teo as well. We'll get to him in a second. Then you got Fade, Vice coming in at 24%. Pretty good. I would expect, honestly, that to go up as time goes on, because I think people are realizing that Vice is pretty strong overall. Perhaps a big faller from, years prior, of course. Viper coming down to a very average, 23%. Teo at 23%, again, assuming there is no nerf or anything like that, probably that's going to bump up. Then you've got Yoru, Killjoy, Neon, and then we're getting into kind of the agents that didn't get played so much. And actually, we've got to so many agents now that I had to leave Harbor and Reyna. You can just see them off here, off screen essentially, because, they had even less games than Sage's 9 here overall. And now let's come to the non-mirror win rates, which perhaps unlike the pick rates is a little harder to predict in general, but you're going to read this in the same way. The ones who are grayed out, like Phoenix here, they are grayed out if they didn't have 30 non-mirror games overall, so that is the cutoff point. So the first agent who has, the correct amount of games played to get a color is Neon. And that really might surprise some people, I know, because, I think most people probably think that Neon isn't that good anymore after the big nerf, but it seems like teams were still able to win with it. Was there a bit of like, oh, EDG is still playing up quite a bit of Neon, Nongshim, who are a pretty good team, are obviously playing a lot of Neon? Yeah, that probably is part of it, to be honest, but it still seems like if you do have a good Neon, you can still play Neon and expect to see some level of success. Then our next agent is Viper. Again, Viper always benefits on this massively from people trolling on Lotus. Then Sova, probably, no surprise really. I mean, Sova, if you look at Sova versus Fade, you can see it definitely seems like Sova is the better option for the most part right now over Fade, it seems. Then you got Vice, who I've kept saying like, hey, this agent is pretty good. Vice actually has one of the higher non-mirror, games overall of anyone, to be honest, and is still doing very well. Then you got Raze, again, no real surprise there. You've got Astra over Omen. It's interesting, right? Because I think most people would still say that Omen is stronger than Astra overall, but Astra does tend to do better in this than Omen does. I don't necessarily know why. Maybe that's because more people try and force Omen on maps where Omen isn't as good. But then you got Teo at 53%. And I think, again, considering how new Teo is, I would expect this to go up, assuming nothing changes with Teo. Initial usage of Teo maybe wasn't so good, and he still has a positive non-mirror win rate, which probably tells you that, yeah, Teo is probably going to be pretty good. Then you got kind of your middle pack here where there isn't too much to talk about in general, but I do, of course, I have to talk about Breach. Because for those of you who have, been with me for a while, you will know that at the end of every year, for the past 3 years running, Breach has been the worst agent in the game in terms of non-mirror win rate. He still isn't doing that great, right? We're still on the 3rd row here, okay? But he isn't last, which is very, very heartwarming. But then, as I say, you've got Fade, who's kind of been struggling, and Yoru actually way down here as well. And I know that this might surprise some people as well. People are going like, a lot of people, myself included, think that Yoru is good. So why is Yoru down here, right? Why is Yoru struggling so much? Well, maybe Yoru is being forced onto maps. Maybe people are overrating Yoru on some of these maps, like Abyss, right? Where we talked about his struggles. And a lot of this, 40% overall win rate is coming from Abyss, basically. If you eliminated the Yoru Abyss games, he wouldn't be doing nearly as bad and would probably be kind of more in the middle pack. So that is definitely part of it. People forcing Yoru on Abyss where maybe Yoru isn't as good on that map. And also, of course, Yoru is still quite a complex agent to play and make work. We definitely have seen teams make it work, right? We have seen, some of the better teams like G2, make this agent work in general. But, for some of the lesser teams, maybe it would be better off if they, played just Raze or played just Jet. So those are the overall non-mirror win rates for the start of 2025. I, of course, will keep doing this as we go forward into 2025. We'll eventually end up with all of the tier 1 games being, coalesced into this data set, and we'll see how it goes in general. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video, and I will see you tomorrow.